We're joined now from Tehran by Professor Mohammad Marandi. Let me read you the quote from President Rouhani. Mr. Marandi, don't play with the lion's tail. This would only lead to regret. Presumably, Mr. Rouhani thinks that Mike Pompeo is inciting revolt in Iran.
No, I think it goes far beyond that. What the regime in Washington is trying to do is that it's trying to strangle the Iranian economy. They're trying to make ordinary Iranians suffer. They're trying to make women and children suffer. And this is a very barbaric and inhumane policy. And the Iranians, they've shown their goodwill to the international community, even though from day one, the Iranian nuclear program had always been within the framework of the NPT and international law. But because of U.S. accusations, the Iranians signed the nuclear deal and limited their nuclear program to get rid of this excuse that the Americans were using for years. But now we see that the Americans, despite the nuclear deal and despite the fact that the Iranians gave significant concessions, they've ripped up the agreement and they're engaging in economic warfare against innocent people. So President Rouhani is basically warning the Americans that you will have to face the consequences if you engage in war on ordinary Iranians.
But if the consequences of that are to shut the Straits of Hormuz to oil shipping, that would bring you in direct conflict with the Fifth Fleet, and that would be suicidal.
No, don't underestimate the power of Iran. The United States knows quite well that Iran's defense capabilities in the Persian Gulf region and across the region are quite significant. And the oil trade is a very sensitive issue. So I think that it would be very foolish for the Americans to underestimate Iran. Of course, Iran has no intention of stopping the oil trade. But if the Americans think, and the Americans and their regional client regimes like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates think that they can put that sort of pressure on Iran and strangle Iranian people and get away with it, they're mistaken. And I think that the Iranians can also cause difficulty for the Saudi regime to a lesser degree or increase pressure gradually. For example, there is the possibility that the Iranians may begin stop and searches on ships bound to and from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Remember, after all, the Saudi Crown Prince recently said they want to take the war to Iran. And after that, we had increased terrorist attacks in Iran by ISIS, in Tehran, and on our borders with Pakistan and Kurdish Iraq.
Professor, we've become used to President Trump tweeting sometimes in caps, sometimes in lowercase, and I guess in a sense it doesn't really matter. That's just the way he puts his tweet together. But the problem for Iran, it seems to me, is that it's increasingly clear that you're not just about to become under sanctions pressure from the United States, but that European companies, faced with the choice between trading with Tehran and trading with America, have made it very clear that they're going to choose trade with the Americans. You're about to become economically very squeezed. That's a problem for the Iranian regime, isn't it?
Well, I think the U.S. regime is through using the sort of tactics that it's using now against Europe is basically humiliating Britain, France, Germany, that have signed on to the nuclear agreement. And what Trump is doing is he's basically telling the Europeans that you're nothing, that you are, or your signatures are worthless. I dictate the terms and you obey. If that's fine with the Europeans, yes, then I think trade between Iran and Europe will come to an end. But there are countries that are very concerned about U.S. behavior, and they're willing to assert their independence. Because they know that if they don't assert their independence, countries like Russia and China, among others, they know that they'll be next. So when the United States weaponizes the dollar and financial institutions, that is not just a threat to Iran, that's a threat to all other countries. This sort of lawlessness is something that I think the international community cannot accept. So the decision is that of Europe's, but Iran is not going to kneel to Trump. Iran is going to be independent. Iran is working within the framework of international law. Iran has an elected government, unlike U.S. allies in the region. And it's the United States that's created instability through wars in Iraq and
Right.
Afghanistan and the dirty war in Syria and the support of the Saudis in Yemen.
Professor Marandi, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us from Tehran.